Hello, everyone, and welcome to another ASUG Partner Webcast. My name is Maureen McInerney, Partner Marketing Specialist here at ASUG, and I'll be your moderator for this event. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for this presentation. Today's webcast is being recorded. The link to the recording and the accompanying slides will be posted to the ASUG website calendar of events, and all registrants will receive a follow-up email with the link to those materials once the webcast has concluded. I'd like to remind our audience members that you can submit your questions at any time by clicking the purple Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Today's webcast is Business Intelligence and Analytics for Decision Making. Our speaker today is Gary Cokins, CPIM from Analytics-Based Performance Management, LLC. Today's webcast is sponsored by ERPfixers. ERPfixers is an online platform for posting SAP requests, questions, and issues. They also offer optimization assessments in the major SAP modules. For more information, go to www.ERPfixers.com. And with that, I'll hand it over to Gary to get us started today.
Thanks, Maureen, and it's a pleasure to present. I think this is my second ASUG conference, and I really appreciate Paul Ovigel, who is the founder of ERPfixers and is a great business model, for inviting me. Just a little bit of background about myself. One, by looking at my college years, you can tell I'm an old guy. I'm 69. My grandsons are 15 and 19, but I'm having a great time. I'll describe that in a second. I did get my industrial engineering and operations degree from Cornell in 1971 and my MBA from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management in 1974. My career has really been in three-thirds. The first decade was in industry with FMC Corporation as a division controller, but then also plant manager on the operations floor. I am APIC certified over 30 years ago, CPIM. My middle 15 years was with Deloitte and KPMG and Electronic Data Systems, which is now part of HP, in their consulting branch. And then up until 4 years ago when I retired, I was 16 years with SAS, the large analytical software vendor. And when I did retire, though, I've kind of became free, and I've actually now presented at 8 SAP conferences. I pretty well know a lot of the SAP community, and I neglected to put a link in these PowerPoints to a website that has, I think, about 15 blogs and articles that I've authored for SAP. So why the books? There's a reason for that. I think careers have a lot more to do with luck and circumstances than being smart and competent. And I had a lucky break in 1988. KPMG struck an exclusive contract with Professor Robert S. Kaplan of the Harvard Business School. Some of you may recognize his name with the Kaplan and Norton Balanced Scorecard and Strategy Map work, but he did the early pioneering work in activity-based costing. And so I got recruited from Deloitte, and for 5 years I got trained and implemented ABC, and that led to writing an activity-based costing book. But then as things broadened out, I realized, wait, costs aren't the center of the universe. You got cycle time, quality, risk management, all these other moving parts, and that's when I began to write books on corporate and enterprise performance management. So let's get started. Who will benefit from this presentation? Managers who have previously struggled at promoting financial planning and analysis, corporate performance management, and integrate methods, and integrating business analytics into their decision support systems. Managers who intend to champion any or all corporate performance management and business analytic improvement techniques, and they need a compelling call to action. And the reason I have champion in quotation marks is because it's just been my observation that although it's nice to have senior executive sponsorship for new initiatives or programs, often they at the C-suite top are preoccupied with firefighting or short-term priorities. And it's typically managers like 1, 2, 3 levels down from the C-suite who basically ask, how long do we want to perpetuate using some of our stale or arcane methods? And they got passion, fire in the belly, and, when are we going to be more progressive and advanced? And so I hope there are champions listening to this webinar because you're really the audience I prefer to actually present to. I also want to manage your expectations. I'm going to hold questions to the end, and this is a long presentation, so that there may not be enough time. Maureen will either forward the questions to me, and then also my email address is at the end, or you can go to my website at the bottom corner and send me an email there. Also, to manage your expectations, about halfway through I'm going to do some examples, and they're going to be primarily in the finance and accounting space, but the beginning will be generic about for all line functions within a company. So I think this cartoon sort of sets the stage for the entire webinar. Drowning in data, but starving for information. You have this poor beleaguered clerk, shoulders hunched, sad, paper all around him, and the supervisor to the left in the doorway is asking him, "It looks like you've got all the data. What is the holdup? You know, I gave you the request this morning. How come you don't have the answer this afternoon?" And that's the whole issue with data science and data analytics. So the agenda I'm going to go through is, first I want to take you through the various stages of maturity of analytics, and then clarify what the heck is business analytics. There is some confusion and lack of consensus, and why is it valuable? Then briefly some examples of business analytics. Want to briefly talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotic process automation, because it's basically part and parcel of the analytics revolution. 5 simple effects that digitization will impact the accountants. And then I'm going to have these 2 or 3 examples about analytics for the CFO function, and then I'll wrap it up. So put your seatbelts on. Let's go. This is a pretty good continuum, I like, of analytics. It starts with descriptive. That's always historical, looking backwards. You know, pie charts, histograms, that kind of stuff, visualization. Then we move to diagnostic, which is still looking backwards, but this is the area where you would get outliers or anomalies, you know, using correlation analysis and the like. The next 2, we now move to the future view, the predictive view, you know, and so, you know, forecasting, basically regression analysis kind of things. And then comes what I call Mount Everest, people like me who have an operations research degree, you know, of all the choices you could do in the predictive view, what if scenarios and so forth, what is the best choice? And really becomes almost really the world of optimization, even including linear programming. So business analytics allows more knowing and controlling. So if you look at this, first, this grid, you've got the vertical axis is the ability to know something from unknown to known, and the horizontal is the ability to control things, you know, from uncontrollable to controllable. But what happens is when we basically use analytics, that upper right corner really gets expanded. You basically get ability to know things and the ability to control things. The convergence of data and technology is creating career opportunities in data science that can be leveraged by accountants and actually any of the line functions, increase their efficiency and improve their effectiveness. Let's move to the next. Why is business analytics even needed? Well, let's just really step back and kind of put our MBA hats on. How does any organization even gain a competitive edge? Well, some of the options are being first to market via innovation, such as, you know, Apple with iPhones, by customer loyalty, such as like Tiffany's and high-end jewelry, or being low-cost, low-price provider like a Walmart. But the question is, how sustainable are any of these, if you will, you could think of them as strategies in the long term? Isn't competition ultimately about cost leadership, differentiation, or focus? And I'm drawing in this section from Professor Michael Porter of the Harvard Business School. Many of you recognize his name as sort of like the thought leader in competitive advantage. Cost leadership strategy is accomplished via improving process efficiencies, unique access to low-cost inputs, vertical integration, avoiding certain costs, and so forth. The differentiation strategy is accomplished via developing products and or services with unique traits valued by customers. Again, Tiffany's being an example. The focus strategy is accomplished via concentrating on a narrow segment with an entrenched customer loyalty. The question is, don't each of these have risks today? The problem is these generic strategies from Michael Porter are vulnerable. Why? Because with cost leadership strategy, other firms can lower their costs. Several years ago, it may take them a couple of years with agile methodologies. They could maybe do it in 6 months. Differentiation strategy. You could have imitation by competitors or changes in customer taste. Focus strategy. Broad market cost leaders or micro-segmenters can invade and erode your customers' loyalty. I mean, Amazon being an example, I mean, they started as, you know, basically a book publisher, then they had warehouses with other catalog items, like competing against a Sears or a Montgomery Ward's or a Target, and now they're actually invading the cable TV, Netflix, and space. So the point is, The best defense is agility with quicker and smarter decision-making using statistics, analytics, and operations research. I'm basically kind of saying it's really tough to basically just have a generic strategy and stick with it. Maybe the best thing, since it's such a volatile world with so much uncertainty, is gain the competencies and skills. Now, there is confusion and lack of consensus about what is business analytics. Is it a data warehouse? Is it data mining with query, drill down, and reporting, like getting to a line item of an invoice or a purchase order? Is it business intelligence with enhancements? And in a few minutes, I'm going to distinguish business intelligence from business analytics. Business analytics is a step above BI. Is it the technology of data governance, data management, data quality? That's more sort of an IT thing for the CIO in the glass house. Is it probability and statistics like regression and correlation analysis or forecasting with optimization equations? And I don't know, some of the older people listening to this webinar are saying, gee, I took those courses in college and I just wanted to get a passing grade and get the heck out of there. Well, sorry, it's here, it's arrived. But the good news is you don't have to brush off your college textbook and basically refresh your memory of how those things work. But you're going to need some sort of skill sets in your organization that do have these skills. So is it all above? Well, I could give you a definition from Wikipedia in this next slide, or go to the breakthrough book from almost 10 years ago by Professor Tom Davenport from Babson College and Jeannie Harris from Accenture. The title of that book was Competing on Analytics. But I'm not going to go grab a definition from there. Regardless of how analytics should be defined, there should be no argument what is the purpose of analytics, and it's pretty straightforward: better decisions and better actions. Analytics goals should be to gain insights and foresight and to solve problems, to make better and quicker decisions with more accurate and fact-based data, and to take those actions. It is the use of internal and external data to provide a competitive advantage to an organization. And when I mention external data, today people can actually access information from the internet. We call it scrubbing or scraping, and there can be actually text analytics where it can actually read words or even listen to voices. So let's start distinguishing BI from BA. Rick, I always like to say there is no intelligence with business intelligence. BI is really about query, drill downs, and reporting. But in contrast, what analytics is about investigation and discovery. So if you want to think of this in a hierarchy, business intelligence consumes stored information. What analytics does is it produces new information from the stored information. And what the corporate performance management methods do is they deploy the analytics in the context of each individual method. And I'm going to show 3 examples of these methods later on. Just to clarify, corporate performance and enterprise performance management is not a process, it's not a system. It's really the integration of multiple methods, profitability reporting, perhaps using activity-based costing principles, strategy map, balanced scorecard for strategy execution, move from the budget to driver-based rolling financial forecast, enterprise risk management, lean management, Six Sigma. All these moving parts basically fit together, and that's what enterprise performance management is. Okay, insights and actions. Queries simply answer questions. What business analytics does is it creates questions. Further analytics then stimulate more questions, more complex questions, and more interesting questions. And most importantly, business analytics also has the power to answer the questions. And I'm going to get a little serious here, although some of you may think, God, he's pretty serious so far, but no, I'm a pretty humorous guy. But let's get serious. I believe in the past, the best executives and leaders had the best answers. Today, I do not think that is the case. Today, I think the best executives and leaders have the best questions. There is just too much complexity, too much volatility, too much uncertainty for them to rely on their gut feel or intuition or so-called sixth sense or the way they answered questions in the past that got them promoted to the C-suite levels they're at now. They need to create a culture of discovery and exploration and tolerance for making mistakes as long as you learn from those mistakes. So a little bit of textbook stuff here. Let's talk about what are some of the common statistical terms in the world of analytics. We'll start with the descriptive and diagnostic, the past period ones. We've got distribution curves, typically bell-shaped, normal distribution, but they can be skewed left to right with mean, median, standard deviations. We've got correlation. Correlation is about the dependency relationships among, two or more variables. We've got segmentation, dividing groups into subgroups, male, female, old, young, and there's dozens of other ways of segmenting, products and services as well. We've got cluster analysis, grouping objects that are more similar than other objects. When we go to the predictive view, now we kind of get into some hypothesis testing, yes, no, that's often how PhD candidates in their university basically do their thesis. And then regression. Regression is really that world of forecasting dependent variables from independent variables. And I'll give an example later in the presentation of that. So which X is most likely to Y? Let's do a few examples. In retail merchandising, like a Macy's, which product in a retail store chain can generate the most profit without carrying excess inventory, but also not having periods of stockouts? Classic production and inventory control problem. Customer profitability. Which customer will generate the most profit lift from our least effort? Kind of think of it as return on customers, an analogy to return on investment. Employee retention. Which of our employees will be the next most likely to resign and take a job with another company? There is software analytics tool on this third one that will actually look at, let's say, the last 5 years of employee turnover, both voluntary and involuntary. And look at the employee master of all the variables that were included, how old they were, what their salary level was, what their salary increase amounts were, what the interval of salary increases, what departments they worked in, what university they went to, and many, what the color of their eyes and the color of their hair. Just joking, but there can be hundreds of those variables. Then what it will do is it will basically calculate on top of the existing workforce, hit calculate, and you get a rank order, and at the very top will be the next employee most likely to leave because they've got the characteristics and traits of the ones that have. Basically, these are examples of analytics. These are the types of questions asked every day, and what business analytics fills in is the which is X is most likely to Y. Let's contrast business intelligence from BA. Business intelligence, which is the left side of this diagram, really starts with standard reports, ad hoc reports, the query and drill down, the line item of a purchase order or invoice, maybe alerts, upper bound, lower bound limits. Business intelligence tends to be reactive. It's really reporting. What business analytics does is it takes it to a higher level. We then start with that, and it's proactive, not reactive. We start with those statistical analysis using some of the techniques I just mentioned. And we move on to forecasting, and then up to predictive modeling, and then again, Mount Everest, really at the top, optimization, of all the scenarios that we could think of, what is the best scenario. Now, some of you may be asking, well, what the heck was the difference between 6 and 7, forecasting and predictive modeling? I'll tell you. Forecasts tell you how many ice cream cones will be sold in July, so you can set expectations for planned costs, profits, supply chain impacts, and other considerations. Predictive models tell you the characteristics of ideal ice cream customers, the flavors they will choose, and the coupon offers that will entice them. So if your goal is to do a better job of buying raw materials for the ice cream plan and to have them at the factory at the right time, at the right place, right quantity, your company needs a forecasting solution, classic ERP, production and inventory control. But if the marketing department is trying to figure out how, where, and which most attractive customers to market the ice cream with those coupons, deals, discounts, and offers, it needs a predictive modeling solution. So here's an example of using analytics, determining the value of a home for realtors. When you're searching for a home, you're out purchasing a home, there's a lot of data on individual houses that have been sold. I won't go through the whole list, the selling price, the total square footage, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, so on and so forth. And I'm going to give you a real-world example that applies to me. I relocated to Raleigh, North Carolina from Chicago, where I'm a native, go Cubs. And my wife wanted to have a golf, either green or fairway or tee in the back of our house. And so what I wanted to know was, wonder what the incremental higher price is to have that compared to not having that. And so I did have access with all of the purchase selling data to all of the existing price sales, but I could then differentiate, after I kind of basically held a constant, those that had all constant, sort of comparability, that had a golf course, green, fairway, or tee in the back, and those that did not. And it actually wound up being about $80,000. And so that helped me basically know when I was basically searching for homes, I could kind of tack on that, $80,000. Business analytics are self-learning. So let's use an example of how banks basically look at the credit worthiness of borrowers. What they will look at when people are looking for an automobile loan or a mortgage, their income, their payment history, their current debt, their work history, and so forth. And what it will then do for a new loan applicant, it will basically use the calculation from that information to determine the score of the credit worthiness of the client. But as time goes by, sometimes the application could have been accepted when in fact the person went bankrupt and couldn't pay, or vice versa. So with the score, in the feedback, you go through the plan, do, check, act. The algorithm gets smarter and smarter over time. We'll also see that with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and robotic process automation. So let's look at some examples. Now, there is a Hollywood celebrity who at the beginning of their career with their publicity agent looked at the top 10 grossing revenue films in history. And what they discovered was all 10 films had special effects. All 10 films had special effects with aliens, and all top 10 films had special effects with aliens and a romance story. Who is the celebrity? Answer, Will Smith, Independence Day, Men in Black, I, Robot, I Am Legend, Hancock, which was actually panned by the movie critics. It's just an example of a celebrity who actually used analytics to advance their career. But analytics can be used in so many areas: sports teams, crime prevention, music score analysis, especially sports. People love using analytics in sports. And if you're interested in two articles I co-authored, go to a website called Informs, INFORMS.org. It's the Institute of Management Science and Operations Research. I'm on the Sports Analytics Committee, and I think if you go to their website, just click on or search on my name, and you'll see how we've described. There's a group of 5 of us on the task force, and it's really fascinating how analytics are used in sports. But what about mainstream business analytics and mainstream business and government? Well, here's a laundry list, which I won't go through, but let's just start at the beginning. Retail sales and merchandising analytics, markdown and assortment planning for slow-moving items that you move down to the basement, figure out the price. Financial service analytics, risk and loan credit scoring, like the example I just gave. Pharmaceutical analytics, drug development, clinical trials. Let's just go down further. Fraud analytics in the insurance industry, supply chain and transportation analytics for route optimization. You get the idea. It really can be applied in so many places. So let's move on. I now do want to just take a little side journey about the impact that this digital revolution will have on organizations. Many professions need to prepare for substantial change and threats to jobs in accounting. This is because there is an accelerating and disruptive digital technology transformation in progress. It is referred to as the digital revolution. It can potentially adversely impact an organization's competitiveness and will be replacing some employee jobs with computers. We talked of disrupt or be disrupted. Good examples are obviously Uber in the taxi industry, Airbnb in the hotel industry. When's the last time you ever phoned a number and got a company got a telephone operator? Not lately. And the velocity, the speed at which these new technologies are basically being, fully adopted is speeding up, as from technology to technology. I mean, as an example, just look at the legal profession. In the past, a lower level legal clerk would have to, thumb through pages and books for a course. Now a computer can basically do it almost in near real time. In the accounting world, there are 5 places, and this is just for the accountants, that artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotic process automation, and cognitive software, the 4 of those kind of are all coupled together, will have an impact. The first will be on transactional processes. Accounts payable, receivables, payable, invoicing, it will be replaced by a computer. The repetitive, the computer can basically memorize what a clerk is doing and basically do that. Number 2, the period end close. Again, the whole general ledger, all of the integration, and SAP is doing a great job on this, of all of the numbers. When you get to the month end, basically we're in the past, journal entry and all this stuff, boom, you got your period end close. The effect on auditing, this is going to be a really impact on the CPA firms and the internal auditing. Now they go through sampling and so forth. With the computer, it will be a 100% audit and almost near real time. Outliers and anomalies will be spotted, and then the artificial intelligence will even learn in case some people do some really clever fraud events. Well, once that fraud event does slip by, computer will say, I won't let that happen a second time. The effect on business process outsourcing of accounting tasks. Many of the outsourcing companies, as examples, in India, in Bangalore, and last year I actually did 17 seminars in 6 cities in India, and I visited at midnight because that's when they work, so that they're in the same time zone as the U.S. or in Europe. And, it's an endless sea, hundreds of desks of clerks basically doing the processing work for the companies, but even their jobs will be impacted. But they're going to be smart. What they're going to do is they're going to move up to analysis. And then the effect on regulatory filings, for the SEC and so forth. And get this, with natural language processing, NLP, even the month-end close report, what's called the variance report, the management report that goes to this executive team and to the board of directors, will be done by a computer. This may surprise you, but in almost maybe half the newspapers today, sports articles in baseball are actually written by a computer, not by a journalist. Why? Because there's so much data collection now in baseball that the entire box score, every pitch, every inning, what the batter did, where it got hit, what fielder picked it up, what stolen base, every single event, micro event, is basically captured. Therefore, the computer can basically thumb through that, go through that, know where, who took the lead when, or was it a big score, close game, whatever. It will actually write the news story. Now, it won't be complete. Then the journalist will basically read that and do the editing and change words and maybe enhance it a little bit. So journalists will shift from being authors to editors. And the same thing is going to happen in industry for how basically, month-end reports or various reports are produced. Natural language processing, NLP. So let me show you a few examples in the finance and accounting function. And I want to share where the source of this came from is a magazine article that I authored, and the website or the link to it is in the bottom left. And there's a little bit of background. When I did retire from SAS, the CEO of the Institute of Management Accountants, Jeff Thompson, phoned me up. Now, the Institute of Management Accountants today is actually 110,000 members in 140 plus countries. So it's not quite as big as the AICPA, which is where the Chartered Professional Accountants are. The IMA basically certification is the Certified Management Accountant. So Jeff Thompson phones me up and says, Gary, not going to let you sit in a rocking chair down there in Raleigh, North Carolina, because I've been presenting and I've been involved with the IMA over 30 years and constantly presenting at conferences. And he said, why don't you do a part-time job? We'll call it executive in residence. And I said, fine. What am I supposed to do? What's my job description? He says, I don't know. You write the job description. So I did. And I said, I will basically do these international tours to promote the profession. And I'll write 2 articles a year for the Strategic Finance magazine. And I've now done 8 in the last 4 years. And one of them is this one called Mining the Past to See the Future. If you do care to see the other articles, if you go to imanet.org and just do a search on my name, you'll see stuff that I've written for them. So let's start with the first example, the balanced scorecard and the validation of key performance indicators. I'm going to presume many of you are familiar with this term, key performance indicator, KPI. And the tools that are used, these are now corporate performance management tools, is the strategy map and the balanced scorecard. And I'll talk about those two in a second. But above them is something arguably more important. It's the vision and mission statement. And that must come from the executive team. In my mind, that's their job. Their job is to set direction. The executives need to answer the question, where do we want to go? But what the strategy map, balanced scorecard, and all of these other basically CPM methods, lean management, Six Sigma, and so forth, answer is a different question. How will we get there? What are the projects? What are the initiatives? What are the core processes that we basically need to get better at? Now, many organizations allegedly claim they have a balanced scorecard. Kaplan and Norton authored the first books, and they've done several afterwards over 10 years ago. Your organization may have one. But very few organizations actually have a strategy map. And this may surprise you, but I believe the strategy map is orders of magnitude more important than the balanced scorecard. The balanced scorecard is just a feedback mechanism. That's why I have the arrow going left from right to the strategy map. Oh, I want to go back here for a second. So here is a simplistic, fictitious example of a strategy map. What Kaplan and Norton recognized is that executives were overreacting to financial results reported at the end of the period. That's the top of this diagram, if you will. What they said is you need to shift your attention to non-financial metrics collected during the period so that you can react to them, monitor them against various targets, KPIs associated with the objectives. And they created this map with 4 perspectives that has cause and effect relationships from bottom to top. So the way it works is you start with learning and growth and innovation. That's sort of the soft part for employees. And though if you're accomplishing those objectives, they'll contribute to the next level, which is the internal process improvement objectives. And if you're accomplishing those objectives, they'll contribute upward to the customer loyalty, retention, satisfaction objectives. And then further all the way up, if all of those are basically being satisfied or aligned, you'll get the financial results, which is where the executives tended to typically focus. So all these arrows, think of them as the measures, typically 2 or 3. I've kept it simple, KPIs per objective. The definition of a KPI is monitoring the progress towards accomplishing a strategic objective. There are a lot of other measures, operational measures. Some companies, if it moves, they measure it, and that's okay. But the definition of operational measures, which are not KPIs, every measure can't be a K. Typically, you want to have 30 or 40. You can have hundreds of other measures. They're measuring really a process, cycle time, and so on and so forth. So think of it really like in the Olympics. A crew that gets the gold medal and crew in the water, they're stroking exactly in sync. The one that doesn't get the gold medal, some of their rowing is off. The ones that don't even qualify for the final heat, they're rowing in different directions. It's kind of screwed up. So to basically summarize the strategy map, and I'm leading to you an example here, so be patient with me in analytics. A learning environment will stimulate process excellence. Process excellence will lead to customer intimacy, loyalty, satisfaction, retention, and that will then create the financial results. Now, typically a strategy map is done in a PowerPoint, but there is, because you draw the boxes, you draw the lines, that's what you just saw in my previous slides, but there is computer software that can basically kind of like monitor, basically, capture the various KPIs and their targets and so forth. Now, let's imagine we've got 24 months of KPI information. We can look back in the 24 months and do a correlation analysis. And in this next slide, notice what I posted in there was really, just think of it as an analytical calculation engine. And hit go, and it will look at the correlation of how the lower level KPIs, remember there's cause and effect, they go up, they go from bottom to top. So each KPI at the bottom is contributing to the next KPI, which in turn is contributing to the next KPI as we go up. So with correlation analysis, we can calculate the explanatory value and magnitude that a KPI has on another KPI that it's influencing. So in the next slide, and I have a problem with my PowerPoint graphics, what you should have seen is very thick arrows of KPIs and very thin ones, so just use your imagination. For the thick arrows, it means highly correlated. For the thin arrows, it means not too correlated. And they can even have negative correlation, whereas if a department is doing too good, it's actually adversely impacting the performance of another department. Tension and conflict is always normal within a company. You know, salespeople want lots of inventory, operations people want faster throughput and lower inventory. So what I'm showing you here is that the strategy map with your correlation analysis becomes a scientific laboratory. It's not just a PowerPoint with a bunch of arrows in between. One can actually start validating the quality of the KPIs. And if the correlation is low, well then basically either eliminate it or look for other ones that have high. An example of analytics being embedded into a corporate performance management method. Let's look at a second example. Customer profitability analysis, the shift from being product-centric to being customer-centric. The only value a company will ever create is the value that comes from its customers, the current ones and the new ones acquired in the future. To remain competitive, one must determine how to keep customers longer, grow them into bigger customers, make them more profitable, serve them more efficiently, and acquire relatively more profitable customers like your existing profitable customers. But we have a problem. Most accountants don't measure customer profitability. They don't measure anything below the product gross profit margin line or the standard service line if you're in a service industry like a bank or insurance company or travel agency. They stop at the product or service line, and they don't trace or assign selling, marketing, distribution, customer service. Activity-based costing actually is a solution that does this. And when you use activity-based costing, it will actually disaggregate all of the indirect and shared expenses, as well as many of the direct expenses, and trace them to the products, to the channels, to the types of orders, to the types of customers, and so on and so forth, to actually give you a profit and loss statement by each customer. And in this fictitious example, you can see that up to the gross profit margin line, there is a 30% composite profit margin. But between the 30 and 8, 22 more points of margin are eroded, have nothing to do with making the product or delivering the service. It's all basically distribution. So if you calculate this for every single customer, you can put it on two different graphs. This is the first one. You'll see the next one. This one has the sales volume is on the horizontal axis from small to largest. The horizontal axis is the profitability. You can see that the square to the farthest right is the highest sales customer. But there's some customers above that that are more profitable with less sales. But at the bottom, there are actually some customers with substantial sales that are unprofitable. The point is, customer sales revenue is not a proxy for profitability because high demanding customers, basically changing schedule, never buying standard, calling help desk, returning goods, cause so much high demands that they actually erode profitability. You can take the same data points, that upper P&L and below the gross profit line, and put it on a grid like this, where each customer is an intersection in the grid. The vertical axis is the profit mix, gross profit margin. Is the customer buying high margin mix from you or low margin? The horizontal is that, kind of like angels on the left, we love them, devils on the right, the high maintenance customers. And now things become obvious. The most unprofitable customers are on the bottom right because they're buying, low margin product mix from you, profit mix from you, and they're difficult to serve. The most profitable customers are on the upper left, because they're buying high margin from you and they're easy to serve. And now the name of the game is move the dots. And this is where marketing and sales needs more information. Things like, unbundling, like the banks have been doing, with deposits and so forth. The airlines have been doing with baggage. Charging individual fees for those unbundling, if you will. Cross-selling, upselling. If they buy a set of golf clubs, can I sell them a golf shirt? If they buy the golf shirt, can I sell them a second one? And so there needs more information is needed by sales and marketing to basically move these dots from the bottom right to the upper left. Well, here's a way in which an analytical technique can do it. Now, I want to forewarn you, this is fairly embryonic and not that many companies are doing it, but as analytics evolve, more will. One can calculate, again, profitability, those who can do it, and it's a real minority of companies bothering to do it, and you have to use activity-based costing principles to do it. You can then put the deciles. You can take, if you had, let's say, 1,000 customers, the first 100 would be in the first vertical histogram, the next 100 and the one to its right, and so on and so forth. And you'll get a similar look. You'll see, wow, most of our money comes from the first decile and to the left, but we actually have unprofitable customers to the right. Well, this begs the question, what causes customers? What differentiates the more profitable from the less profitable customers? Well, you could hypothesize. You could say the ones that are profitable are senior citizens, the ones that are to the right, maybe, are kids and, millennials. Or you could reverse that. Or you could say that the ones on the left are females and the ones on the far right are males. Or reverse that. Or the ones on the left are from high wealthy area zip codes and the ones on the farther right lower. Or vice versa. You could go on and on and on, hypothesize. Why not let a computer do it? And a computer has a technique. There's a statistical technique called recursive partitioning with decision trees. And what it will do is it will go to the customer master file and look at all of those customers and look at dozens, maybe hundreds of variables. What did they buy? When did they buy it? How much? Where is their location? What's their salary? What's their income? So on and so forth. And it will then calculate what is the number one dominant variable that differentiates the more profitable from the less profitable. The blue and the red are showing that pool, if you will, at the top. In this particular example, that number one differentiator was the average order size being certain $10,000. And then the tree will begin to branch down, coming up with the new variable for each one. So I'm just showing an example of recursive partitioning as an analytical technique to know not just how profitable customers work correctly, but why. Let's go to the third level, and I've got 15 minutes to go here, almost. The budget and rolling financial forecasts. The annual budget is actually being criticized and laughed at by a lot of people, and I agree. It takes a couple of months to create the thing, and it's obsolete a couple of months after you produce it. It caves into the loudest voice and strongest, muscle of, veteran sandbaggers who know how to pad that budget so that when they increment next year's, budget, they'll have, some padding there. It's out of date. Well, it's out of date quickly. It also has a lot of use it or lose it behavior. People that are 3-4 months away on a glide path from spending all of their budget, what do they start doing? They start spending needlessly, foolishly, because they want the end of their year to have met of the allotted budget they got, because the next year is going to be incremented. And typically it's done by spreadsheets, up, down, up, down, up, down, by cost centers. I think the budget will eventually be abandoned by many companies. You'll move to driver-based rolling financial forecasts. And the amount of spending an organization requires is really the result in this diagram of two river streams. The top river stream is the recurring, repeatable work. It is demand-driven, typically from customer demand, product, services. The bottom river stream is non-recurring, non-repeatable work, which will come from projects. And I'll show you there are 3 types of projects. There are strategy projects. Those are needed to basically meet the strategy, because in the annual budget, the budget is disconnected from the strategy. The budget is a fiscal exercise done by the accountants that's disconnected from strategy. The second project will be risk-related, risk mitigation by the enterprise risk management community, and then, of course, capital budgets. So how is this moving from the annual budget to rolling driver-based, I call it performance-based budgeting work? For the repeatable work, what one will do is effectively you will calculate your historical costing model backwards. Because in the historical model, you pick up a lot of unit-level consumption rates, cost per material move, cost per blood test in a hospital. I mentioned I was an industrial engineer at Cornell. I think it was second semester freshman year, or volume and mix times unit level consumption rates equals capacity required. What's the head count? What's the spend? So that's how we address that, the repeatable work. For the non-repeatable work, we go to the strategy map that I described earlier. Remember all those little boxes that were strategic objectives? We want to fund them. If we don't fund them, we don't achieve strategy, and strategy execution is really the big frustration of executives. They're pretty good at formulating strategy, or they'll bring in a high-end consulting firm. You know, their frustration is failure to execute it. Carly Fiorini at HP being a good example. You know, she couldn't execute the strategy. The board of directors, boom, she's out of there. Board of directors are no longer seeking their job as ceremonial post-Enron. They take it seriously. Second, risk management projects. When you start basically looking at the severity, potential severity of impact of a risk compared to the probability, if it got high probability and severe, you want to fund the risk mitigation and then capital budgeting. So basically this is really a modeling technique. And this I won't go through in detail in the interest of time. What I've just done is I've disaggregated, I've decomposed the previous two slides. The upper river stream are the shaded ones. You're starting with management accounting, and the other side is really the three non-recurring works. If you look at the box at the bottom right that says derived budget and rolling financial forecast, notice its inputs. From the top is the operational budget. From the left are the three projects: capital budget, strategy budget, risk budget. The source for the operational budget starts with unit level consumption rates times the forecast. You know, volume and mix equals capacity required, head count, pounds, kilograms, and number of employees, and then we monetize it, whatever the currency be, euro, dollars, and what have you. This is going to give a much better way of basically determining, if you will, the annual budget. But because it's repeatable, if you model everything, the only independent variable in this diagram is the forecast of the volume and mix. All of the other variables have been calibrated because you've been using analytical tools or enterprise resource planning tools such as an SAP system. So, but here's the point. Since the forecast is the independent variable, and any forecast is going to basically become less accurate one day, 1 week, 1 month afterwards. And that's what I'm showing in this diagram, this graph. The vertical axis is the accuracy, let's say, of the volume and mix forecast, the sales forecast. The horizontal is time. So 1 day, 1 week, you can see it's beginning to decline. Well, if we refresh the forecast, let's say at monthly intervals, then basically we continuously recalculate, since we've modeled everything in that earlier diagram that I showed you. And that means the accountants can actually produce a pro forma income statement and cash and balance sheet, as well as the result of a cash flow forecast for the treasury function. So where does analytics fit in? Typically, even using such exotic techniques I just described, it's always a single point. Now, some companies will actually, if you look at the middle diagram here, the middle worst base, best case, they'll say, well, let's do a worst case, best case, set of variables. We'll calculate the thing 3 times. Why stop there? What if you basically got, let's say, 7 managers who basically are responsible for 7 key variables that go into basically a rolling financial forecast? Let's say like salary, wages, by country, commodity prices, and so forth. So we come up with 7 variables and 7 managers. Oh, and the managers will be estimating it on a scale of 1 to 7, not just 1, 2, 3. Well, 7 times 7 is 49. Then we can basically have the computer almost instantaneously do 49 different rolling financial forecasts and produce a distribution curve, like you see in the right. Some of you may ask, what's the good of that? Well, it's about generating questions, because if you look at the far left, which is really the worst place to be, it's like, what would all the things would have to go wrong that would give us such a bad outcome? And if you look way to the far right, what are all the things that need to go right that we can move towards? So those were 3 examples of analytics being used in a corporate performance management method. So let's start summarizing. What are some of the benefits from applying business analytics? Well, 1, you're going to get higher return on investment from leveraging automation. If you've got an ERP system in place like SAP, man, you got so much data there. but we got to turn the data into information. Deeper actionable insights and understanding. Reducing uncertainty and managing risk. To the degree you can reduce uncertainty, think of it as error being a big, fat-tailed distribution curve. If we can narrow it, make it a more tighter vertical, then we can rely on our decisions better and actually be more protective of our risk. More intelligent and systematically testing decisions. We can do all these what-if scenarios, probabilistic scenarios. A bridge to a culture of optimization. Remember, Mount Everest to someone like me with operations research. That's really what we want. So let's put this into perspective. Increasingly, organizations' return on investment is shifting from tangible assets to intangible assets. That is, it's shifting from investments in trucks or machines or computers or software or hardware to intangible assets like information. And in this diagram, what it is showing is the return on investment from information is increasing exponentially as you go from left to right, as you go from data to information to knowledge to insights to decisions. The problem is many companies are stuck in the first two red bubbles to the left. All they have is raw data and standard reports. All they can answer is what happened. And frankly, ERP systems, if you really think back in perspective of phases of software, that's all they did. I mean, they were wonderful because they're integrated. I mean, in earlier stages when everything was disconnected. Now, in some cases, the third red bubble, the CIO or the IT department will give some managers some drill-down ad hoc reporting, OLAP, online analytical processing. That's what OLAP acronym stands for. So they can actually, investigate the line item of an invoice or a purchase order and so forth. But they're still restricted to only answering what happened. The world of corporate performance and enterprise performance management, they're synonymous, begins at the first blue bubble. This is where analytics begin to come to play. It's descriptive modeling. I showed you the profitability, by customer. That's done through modeling, not through T accounts and journal entries. The problem with many of the accountants is they think that analytics is what they've been doing for 20, 30 years out of the textbook, selling expenses, a percentage of sales, for benchmarking. Yeah, but very primitive. We're talking about the examples that I provided you. In descriptive modeling, not only what happened, which was the red, but why did it happen? Because we have cause and effect relationships. Now when we move to the fifth bubble, which is the second blue one, predictive modeling, what-if scenario analysis, probabilistic planning, change a variable, recalculate, see what its impact is, change the variable a little bit more, recalculate, see what the change is, sensitivity analysis. Really start thinking like a scientist. Because now we not only know what happened, which is the red, why did it happen, which is the first blue bubble, cause and effect, then what can happen, what are all of the projections, the rolling financial forecast, what-if scenarios, make versus buy decisions, all of those are predictive in the future. Things get trickier there, though, because when you go to the predictive view financially, you do have to classify the behavior of resources as sunk, fixed, step fixed, and variable, which depends on the planning horizon, because in the short term, most capacity is not easily adjustable, but as the planning horizon does go out further, you can replace full-time employees with temporaries, you can lease assets that you would have bought. So you start really getting into the world of macro, or if you will, microeconomics, not just management accounting. At the very top, we're back to our prescriptive analytics optimization of all the choices we could make. What is the best choice? So frustration that I have, and then I'll be done here in a couple of minutes for a few Q&A. Why is it taking so long? Why is the adoption rate for business analytics been so slow? I mean, I graduated from Cornell in 1971, our degree. Man, I thought, wow, this is going to be a great career. This is all going to take off. Well, some cases has only started a few years ago. So what are some of the barriers that are slowing the adoption rate of analytics? Well, the first one are technical barriers, which include IT-related issues. Some of them are the old classic dirty data, low-quality data. But those of you who may be listening that are from the IT side, you're aware of tools like extraction, transform, and load, ETL, that can basically purify and cleanse the data, the quality of the data. Or you've got disparate data sources. Software's on Dell, HP, IBM. You've got all these multiple hardware vendors. IT can solve that. The next problem, though, is the perception barriers of excess complexity and affordability. One of the techniques that I do some part-time freelance consulting, but they're just 1 or 2 day projects, is rapid prototyping. I have a technique of building a ABC model for customer product channel, customer profitability in 2 days. It's not really meant to be used, but it's for accelerated learning. You do it with 4 or 5 cross-functional people in a conference room and then bring in the executives and their line managers the afternoon of the second day, and the light bulbs go on with everybody. Oh, that's how it works. Same thing with the strategy map. I have a 1-day workshop using yellow SWOT analysis Post-its that create a strategy map in 1 day. You could do iterative from there. Make your mistakes early and often, not later when it's more difficult. Crawl, walk, run, fly. But here's the problem. People think analytics is way too complex. What you want to always do is what I just sort of described for the 2 examples I use in corporate performance management. Start small, think big, do pilots, proof of concepts. Get the learning taking. But the real problem is not technical. Software is not the issue. It is people. It's organizational behavior barriers about like resistance to change. People love the status quo. Only a wet baby likes change. Fear of knowing the truth or other departments knowing the truth, not wanting to be measured, not wanting to be held accountable, weak leadership. Technology's got nothing to do with that. Technology, in my mind, including SAP, those tools are proven. What's really needed really is the thinking. So I'm going to end on this last slide. Action steps, get educated, which is what you're doing by listening to this webinar. Get buy-in from people. Do these proof of concepts, pilots, rapid prototyping techniques. I'm not going to go through the links. If you do download the slides, you'll get access to them. There's a chapter there from my Predictive Analytics book that I co-authored with Larry Maisel, which I think is now in the bottom right corner here. And actually, if you go to Amazon.com, chapter 1 is a free download, so I'm obviously not pushing my books here. And your success depends on how well and how fast the right information and intelligence gets to the right people. We only have 3 minutes for questions, so if yours doesn't get answered or you care to send me a question, there's my email address at the bottom, gcokins@garycokins.com. And my website has got a lot of free downloadable articles in the tabs in the website. So, Maureen, I'm back to you. I know I went a little longer, but let's see if we've got a couple questions I can answer.
That's okay. Thanks, Gary. I'll just get right to it. We do have a couple. The first question, based on your observations, what is a major lesson learned by organizations attempting to broaden the adoption rate of applying analytics?
Well, I think they may have asked that question before I got to the end, but I just want to reinforce it. People underestimate the magnitude of resistance to change. And so my observation is you really need to start thinking like a change management, like a sociologist or a psychologist. And many people, at least in our world, my world, you're kind of Newtonian. So the world's a big machine. Give me the levers, pulleys, dials. I want to run it by the numbers. We need to be somewhat Darwinian. Sense and respond. People matter. And so there was also a debate about how to accelerate the adoption of analytics. One extreme is center of excellence. Let's put 3 or 4 PhDs, with analytics in that room, and people will come to them and knock on the door. At the other extreme is basically, hey, just get some early successes. They don't have to be that complicated. Maybe just a simple correlation, and then communicate to others, wow, look how that worked, and look what we learned, and then kind of let the news spread that way. So that's a quick way.
Great, thank you. Looks like we have time for one more question. Why is the CFO and accounting function so many years behind with embracing the use of advanced analytics?
Well, that's a great question. My belief is marketing and supply chain managers, they are like many, many years ahead of the accounting profession. I mean, But they have some advantages. I mean, supply chain, like let's take a Walmart, they can actually have point of sale registers in real time, with every time a customer, and they know who the customer is as they check out, so they can actually kind of like adjust their supply chain purchases and distribution and so forth. On the marketing side, I showed you the example about the ice cream factory where the marketing people can figure out, which customers like what stuff. Or here's an example, associations. If customers bought A and B and C, let's look for customers that only bought A and B, and then we'll try to offer C, since they're probably similar to the ones that bought A, B, and C, with an offer, a deal, a price discount, or a coupon. They're really far ahead. The accountants, man, we just don't have that much information. We've got a general ledger, we've got a payroll system, we've got a purchasing system. So it's not an excuse for the accountants, but they're somewhat less limited for the magnitude of the data lakes that the supply chain, marketing, and research and development, the other line managers just have access to a lot more information. So I believe we're out of time, and it is a professional courtesy to end on time. So, Marina, I'm going to have you wrap up, and I really appreciate being invited to present.
Thank you again, Gary, for a great webcast. On behalf of ASUG, I'd like to thank ERPfixers as well as everyone who took the time today to attend this webcast. If we didn't get a chance to answer your questions, Gary will be following up with you after the webcast. Before we go, I'd like to leave you with some quick info on ASUG for anyone unfamiliar with our user group. ASUG helps connect SAP customers to the people and information that they need to maximize their investment in SAP. If you'd like to speak to someone about becoming a member of ASUG, please message info@asug.com. As mentioned before, the recording and slides from today's program will be posted to the ASUG website, and all registrants will receive a follow-up email. Please take a moment to complete the survey by clicking on the green button at the bottom of your screen. With that, I'd like to close today's webcast. Have a great day.